I write to you now, but I do not write from my room. With a bed so soft and windows so bright, I do not write from my home. With the couches so comfortable and food so good. Oh, food, how I miss it. Water too. If I could get a drop, oh, I would thank God. Well, I did thank someone for it anyways. I do not write it from my treehouse, among my friends so dear and chirping birds so near. I do not write even from the world you live in right now. No, I write from a place much worse. It's ironic because during my last moments on the world, I couldn't imagine any sort of place worse than the place we call Earth. I thought such a place couldn't possibly exist. How wrong I was. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Patrick, and for you to understand my train of thought, I'll need to take you a little back. Back to the world God, your God, no longer mine, put me on. Oh, the 80s, what a fun, great time to be alive. Great movies, great music, somewhat, great friends, great family, great house, great life, great. Sorry, I'm rambling. 11 years old. That was me, living in a suburban home with my mother Sarah, my dad Vincent, my asshole 13-year-old twin brothers Darren and Bryce, and of course my 5-year-old sister Nancy. Come to think of it, I wonder how she's doing right now. Sweet little Nancy. She's always so precious, so innocent. I hope what we went through together never changed that. That anyhow, I can remember the days so clearly. I was playing basketball of 2-on-1. I was one and with Darren and Bryce. The two jerks were creaming me, of course, never hasting to shove me around and taunt me. Patrick, you're an ass at this, they would say. Well, of course I was an ass. I was an 11-year-old playing two against a 13-year-old pricks. Actually, you know something? I'm gonna stop calling them names. See, when you're on Earth, it's easy to call your family members names and quarrel with them constantly. Where I am now, you thought you'd give everything just to hug them for 5 seconds and tell them how much you will love them. Oops, I'm rambling again. Well, soon enough, our mother called us in, and we were having some guests over that night, our new neighbors. The new neighbors in question were the Hofmeister family. Up to that point, I had heard my brothers say about the Hofmeisters were things like, they're creepy as shit, and weird-ass people who gotta go. I didn't even share these opinions. They seemed like okay people to me. Nevertheless, the Hofmeisters came over that night. The family consisted of three. First was 60-year-old Eileen, a skinny woman with short gray hair, always wearing black dresses. Next, we had none other than 60-something-year-old Leo. Don't actually remember that bastard's age, nor do I care to. Also extremely thin with long nose that would make pasty white guy look on the Pink Panther show jealous. Then there was David, their 11-year-old insecure adopted son. I'm pretty sure Leo and David are in the same place. I'm writing from this now, but I'm not certain. See, we don't really get to speak with anyone else here. Anyways, it was quite an eventful evening. Eileen and Leo had tea with my parents, while Darren, Bryce, David, and I hung out in our treehouse, playing cards in the treehouse. I started to get to know David a little better. I must say, though, he seemed like a bit on the weird side. He was probably awkward when it came to discussing things such as where he moved from or what his life at home was like. Still, he was a pretty nice kid, just very shy. Later that night, when the sun went down, my brothers had already gone home, and David and I were just walking down our street lamp lit road. That was when he invited me to his house for a bit. It was on a Friday night, so I figured it'd be okay. Let me say this, his house was big. It was the biggest house in the neighborhood down at the end of my street, sitting high on a hilltop as if it were better than all the others. Behind it was a large field that eventually merged into some woods which lined the horizon. Entering David's house, we walked into his kitchen, where he told me to take my shoes off as to not upset his parents. I heard some footsteps upstairs, so I figured his parents might have gotten back from my house. We sat down on his counter eating yogurt with David, continued to dodge my questions about his home life, or just life in general. I knew that he was adopted. Soon enough, I heard Eileen upstairs. "David, come upstairs, please," she said. David told me to stay put as he'd only be a minute, and just like that he was gone. I sat alone in my kitchen, finishing up my yogurt cup, when I decided to get up and look around to keep myself a bit busy, while David was upstairs doing whatever the hell he was doing. Looking at the fridge, I got a look at some of the pictures that were magnetized to it. These included family photos of the grinning faces of Eileen and Leo, and the frowning face of David. Why did David look so happy of all these photos? Oh, and another thing. There was a photo on top of their fridge of some kid sitting on the floor what looked like a cellar, just staring up at the camera with a blank face. Strange. Then I walked over the shelf in their living room, which was stocked with framed photos and figurines. Lots of self-portraits here, including one of Eileen, her expression blank, eyes looking very cold and lifeless. For some reason, it kind of reminded me of this portrait I'd seen once in a famous cowboy named Buffalo Bill. Name, some sort of stare, expression, and whatnot. Anyway, sorry, I didn't even know what came to my mind. I started to look at some of the figurines on the shelf. A Mickey Mouse doll, a monkey doll, this creeped me out, and a pentagram necklace. Oh, and there was a crucifix necklace. But the cross was upside down. What idiot messed that up? I thought to myself. When I realized that David had been gone for a while, I was getting a little bored with looking at the people's decorations. I decided to go upstairs and find him. Walking up the stairs, I began to hear some weird noises coming from one of the rooms upstairs. It sounded like chanting. As I got to the top of the stairs, I was confirmed that it was. I looked down on the stairs halfway through the Hofmeister home and saw that one of the rooms had a light on the inside, as the door was just open a crack. As I walked towards the door, I could clearly hear Eileen and Leo chanting some sort of weird language I never heard before. I slowly crept towards the room, a decision I regret to this day. I pushed down something that was just out of my view. I didn't dare open the door any wider than I already had, if it had meant satisfying my curiosity to see the places they were blowing down from. Oh man. You can definitely say, from my point of view, I could see a small cauldron filled with steamy liquid. Leo was blowing cigars, smoke, and spitting rum into the bowl. The whole atmosphere of the room was different. I don't even know how to really describe it. It was like I could feel some presence of someone's voice else in there, but I couldn't really see them. Then I saw David in the back corner of the room, curled up into a fetal position. Bawling his eyes out, he looked more terrified than anyone he'd ever seen. Up to that point now, it's a different story. David's terror only grew when his mother, if you want to even call that evil witch sure a good thing, stormed over to the corner of his room and grabbed him by the wrist, pulling him off from the ground in an attempt to get him to bow down whatever they were bowing down to. I could see his fear grow when he watched Leo pull a rooster out of the lerp sack and chop its head off in a brutal animal sacrifice. Then his face went white with horror as he realized how much trouble he was in when piss began to run down his leg onto the floor. That did it. Eileen began slapping David over and over again, angrily screaming at him. "You never, never, never do that in front of the beast!" she screamed. The beating eventually stopped, and David was just heaping a mess of puddle of his own tears and piss. This was when I decided it was a good idea to get the hell out. I turned to exit, but to my haste, I knocked over the many of their family frames that lined the desk upstairs. I winced when this happened, knowing that it was 99.99% probability that a devious couple down the hall heard it. I rushed down the stairs as quick as I could. I nearly tripping myself, but I didn't care. I wanted to get out. Still, poor David. I wished I could have done something to help. Grabbing the door handle, I prepared to make a hasty out through the front door and of that dreaded house. Then I stopped dead in my tracks. Holy shit. Please tell me. Yep, my shoes were still in the kitchen. I ran for my dear life towards the kitchen, locking onto my shoes like a missile. I grabbed them. Yes! Hello, Patrick. No. As I look up to see Eileen, standing over the upstairs balcony, looking down over me like overly friendly expression on her face. I was frozen in place. Do I run? No. What will just look stupid? Also, she'll know when I say those creeps what they were doing up there. Hey, I managed to utter out. I didn't realize you were still here, said Eileen, in much too friendly manner. Oh yeah, sorry, I said. No need to apologize, she said, but this is getting quite late. You should get home. We don't need your parents coming over here now, do we? No, we don't, I thought to myself. I managed to stammer out some stupid reply before saying goodbye and rushing out the front door. Bursting out of it, I'm not going back there, I thought to myself, if only that were true. As I ran home, I looked back at the house, and what chilled me to the bone, in one of the bedroom windows was Eileen, just standing there, staring at me. When she saw me look, she raised her hand and waved. That was it. She knew what I saw. Damn it, well, I ran home as fast as my feet could take me. I immediately told my brothers. Told them about my beatings, the chanting, the cauldron, and Eileen repeatedly addressing someone or something in the room by the names, the Beast and Lucifer. Well, my stupid brothers proceeded to spread this story quickly around the whole entire school until everyone knew. Everyone knew that David's parents were freaky witches at the end of the street, exaggerated and blown out of proportion. The story spread like wildfire. David refused to talk to me, knowing it had been me who spread the rumors. I felt horrible for him, but I didn't know what to do. I was also too afraid to get the police or child services after what I saw at the house. I was too young to know what to do was what I had to do, and if it was not by a choice. I tried to push the whole thing at the back of my mind. That was until Halloween night. A few weeks later, oh good old Hallows Eve. It was one of my favorite holidays ever. That Halloween night I was doing what every kid should be doing, trying to pack as much candy as humanly possible into one pillowcase in one night. My friends and I were trying to hit all the local neighborhoods so we'd be able to mow down candy for months. However, my plans were ruined when we ran into my brothers and their devious, loudmouth friends. My brothers took me aside and told me I had no choice but to show them the window of the room I had seen the Hofmeisters doing their deeds. There was no arguing my way out of it. I soon found myself back at that dreaded place. My brothers, their friends, and I stood in front of the Hofmeisters' yard on the side of their house. In the driveway were moving trucks. I wasn't surprised. Those people had been humiliated. I was actually really happy to see those creeps wouldn't be living down the street from where I sleep anymore. My brother Darren confirmed that they were moving away because of the rumors. Well, before I knew it, my brothers were forcing me to climb a tree to get a better look into the window on the side of the house. They wanted to see if there was anything batshit crazy that would be visible to it. And of course, being the pushover I was, I climbed that tree. It seemed like all was going well, until the light of the window shut off. This was the first sign that something was wrong. However, before I can get in from the tree, and tell my brothers to piss off, we all heard the front door open. Of course, my brothers and their friends took off, leaving me up in the tree. Eileen must have heard them, because the first thing I knew, she was prowling at the side of the house, examining the muddy prints left by my brothers and their friends. This was it, I thought. I'm going to accidentally snap a branch or fall or something, and she was going to catch me. By some miracle, Eileen didn't see me up in her tree and went well inside as I hightailed out of there, leaving my pirate hat, part of my Halloween costume, lying on the ground on their yard. I never wanted to look at that darn house again. I sprinted down my street from my neighborhood, all the way down to the schoolyard, where my friends and I agreed to meet up after my little brother's little scheme. And to my utter dismay, my friends were nowhere to be found. All I could say was that point was that my brothers had better still have my damn candy in their possession. I looked around the schoolyard a bit more, but nothing. Not a sign of my friends. It must have been a pretty late at that point. There wasn't even trick-or-treaters on the street anymore. I knew my parents were going to kill me, so I started to head home. A walk home on Halloween night was the coolest thing ever. It was so peaceful, spooky, and unsettling. All at the same time, I kind of liked that creepy feeling. It wasn't that what gave the Halloween its charm. However, I really don't like the feeling of terror. Kind of like the terrifying feeling that came over when I noticed that I was being followed by Leo's Hofmester's pickup truck. Great. Behind me were Eileen and Leo. Leo, of course, being the lapdog he was driving. Eileen was sitting in the passenger seat. They knew I had spread those rumors. Who else could have? No one. I was their only visitor at their house. I ran as fast as I could down the street to their old fast blue pickup truck, continuing to cruise after me. I eventually veered off the sidewalk and into the woods. I ran faster than I ever could in my life that night. Dashing for the woods, I looked back over my shoulder to see their truck, which was parked on the side of the road in the woods. Holy shit. I thought I'm dead. These people are nuts. Unfortunately, looking at their truck park, I had not seen the fallen tree trunk in the middle of my path, and as you probably guessed, I tripped over it, knocking every last bit of air in my lungs when I hit the ground. I crawled, gasping and wheezing for air, and the next thing I knew, the menacing figure of Eileen was standing over me. She looked ever so frightening in the moonlight. Her gray stringing hair, being illuminated by the rest of her face, remained dark and hidden. Even more frightening when she held out my pirate hat and I dropped it onto my lap. Great, that was strike two for sticking my nose where it didn't belong, and somehow I got the feeling I wasn't getting referred. "Aw, Patrick, you took a nasty fall," sneered Eileen. "Let us take you to our house and take care of you. We'll make sure you're healed and new." I pleaded with her, telling her that I was fine and I needed to get home. Of course she didn't listen. The witch clutched my wrist and dragged me out of the forest, over to their truck. I was dead meat. I was so dead. Well, I could have been if it weren't for that passing neighbor who caught the two of act forcing me into their truck. Eileen and Leo managed to bullshit their way out of the situation before getting into their truck and driving away, leaving me behind. I went home and told my parents about the whole deal. The cops were called, yet after several days of searching, they were stumped as to where the location of the Hofmeisters. According to them, they weren't at their old house, nor they had been to their new one. No record of the apartments or hotel rooms they were on file. Either those demon-worshipping, child-abusing scum had vanished off the grid. I was fine with that and decided to try and get on with my life. Hopefully never have to think about those Hofmeisters again. However, it wasn't long before I noticed weird shit going around my neighborhood. What do I mean by that, you may be asked? Well, first off, there was a couple of instances where I would see a kid on the street, walking up the road like a trance-like state. And where did they walk to? Why, none other than up that damn hill into that dreaded Hofmeister home. Keep in mind I was paranoid at the time, and my bedroom window looked right out to the street. So the only thing noticing this stuff, at least the only one in my house. I tried telling my parents, but they were just annoyed by it, telling me to quit letting my fears get the best of me. I still haven't forgiven them to this day. Then again, all I wanted right now was to tell them to forgive me. The strange occurrences then began when even the scarier turned. One night I woke up to hearing the whispering of my little sister Nancy, and I got out of bed to have a look, as well as look down the hall towards her room. I began to make out what she was saying, like, and okay, I'll go. I opened her door just in time to see her standing on her knees in her bed, staring out the window. However, that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was seeing a scrawny female shadow being projected into Nancy's bedroom by the moonlight. The second I called out to Nancy, the shadow seemed to scurry off. I rushed over to Nancy, asking her who she was talking to. My little sister hadn't the faintest idea of what I was talking about. I told my parents, and this time my dad jumped out of the bed in prospect of someone standing outside of Nancy's window. However, he went outside to find no one. Well, I began to run my mouth yet again. You'd think that you've learned this first time around. To my brothers Darren and Bryce, along with their friends, started to develop a newfound interest in all this Eileen talk. Something that creepy place at the end of the street amused them, gave them a little rush. They loved that type of stuff. Another thing to know about Darren and Bryce was that they had a knack for sneaking out at the house at Saturday nights. Something my parents hated, but nothing really took enough action to prevent it. And sure enough, my parent brothers and their friends snuck out one Saturday night to check out the old Hofmeister house. This time, however, I wouldn't accompany them, but I sure did came to know about it because after my brothers went missing that one night, one of their friends, who was smart enough to get there early on, told me about it. The police went over the Hofmeister's home, search warrant and all to investigate. They found nothing there. Nothing, however. As usual, I continued to be on the one, making terrifying discoveries. This time it was a VHS tape I found sticking out of my VCR of my room one morning. Popping the tape in, the first thing I saw on the TV screen was static out of a cellar. The cellar was so dark and dingy looking, almost like a dungeon. Suddenly the camera began to jiggle around a bit, and whoever was picking it up pointed at none other than my brother Darren. Darren was tied down to a chair, unconscious and looking up bruised, battered, and abused. Boo! The loud yell from the camper's chin jolted Darren awake. The camera person was Eileen. She began to laugh sickly as Darren came to his senses, immediately beginning to cry. Who the hell would do this to another human being? I thought. That was my brother too. I watched in horror as she continued to verbally torment Darren, eventually gained physical with him, smacking him in his face, his chest, and eventually his groin area. This woman was sick, filthy, disgusting person. It wasn't until I saw Eileen begin to pull a sickle out of her pocket that I shut the tape off. Part of me, though, wanted to go on. I had to know if Darren was dead, but I couldn't watch. I couldn't bear to witness my brother getting tortured like that. I rushed upstairs to my parents' bedroom, leaving the VHS and the cassette player. However, my parents were gone. They had vanished. Oh shit, I found them next. While I walked downstairs, I stopped dead in my tracks on the stairwell. Blood ran cold as I noticed Eileen Hofmeister in my room, carefully removing the tape from my VCR with latex gloves. She caught my stare. I thought it was the second we made eye contact. My heart skipped a beat. She grinned at me and waved and saying, I'll be back for you two tonight. And just like that, the witch climbed out of my window and she was gone. I rushed to Nancy's bedroom, now frightened out of my own wits. Oh, thank God Nancy was still there. She was sleeping soundly. That was when I woke her up. I ran in screaming and crying, probably scaring the poor girl to death. But I didn't tell her about the videotape. I just told her the police. That night, our neighbor, Betty, frail old woman, babysat us at her house. No one had a clue on where the heck our parents were. Outside of her home were two police officers, keeping watch over the house. Betty was also a great neighbor. Such a nice old lady. The nicest woman you have ever met. I'm sure she's in heaven right now. If she didn't go to heaven, well, I don't know who possibly would. Anyways, I was pretty antsy that night, even with the cops guarding the house, and I unfortunately was antsy for a very good reason. When the sun went down, I heard her back door open and close. Was it my parents? I suddenly got very excited, rushing to the door. However, all there was no person's muddy footprints on my door. Something wasn't right, but no one could have gone into the house, could they? The cops were outside. I rushed upstairs to get Betty. Running into my parents' bedroom, I heard the shower running, banging on the door. I called to Betty to try and get her attention. No answer. Then I realized nobody showers with their hearing aid on. Oh no! That's when I heard Nancy scream downstairs. I rushed downstairs, really not wanting to go into her room, but I knew I had to. When I got to her room, you guessed it, she was gone. Window flung open. Where the hell are the cops? Taking matters into my own hands, I got in my shoes and ran out the front door. Running down the street, my eyes adjusted to the darkness, just in time to see Nancy entering out of the forest, the same forest that lies on the hill, which was next to the dreaded Hofmeister homesteads. I called out to her desperately, but she was in a trance. and just like the other kids I had seen. But no one would believe me. Mustering up every ounce of courage I had, I ran after Nancy as she disappeared into the darkness of the woods. I ran deep into the dark forest, my feet making loud crunching noises on the gravel path beneath me. Catching up to Nancy, I pleaded and begged her to come on. She wouldn't snap out of it. I began pulling her away, but she continued to walk deeper into the woods. Then, to make matters even worse, I spotted Eileen, who was just about 30 or 40 feet down the path from us. I couldn't snap Nancy out of her damn trance. I'll never forget the way her eyes looked, hypnotized and dilated. It reminded me of that trance that Snake Ka from the Jungle Book put people in. Out of pure desperation, I tried to rear back and slap Nancy in the face, finally snapping her out of her trance. She had no idea what the hell was going on. She just knew to run from Eileen. Eileen immediately broke into a run after us. I never seen that woman in her 60s run that fast. Faster and faster we ran. We were getting away until Nancy's nightgown got caught in the tree branch. I tugged and tugged at her nightgown, desperately trying to free her. Eileen got closer and closer, snickering sickly under her breath. When Eileen within got about 15 feet of us, Nancy's gown finally tore away from that damn tree branch. We darted out of the next exit out of the woods, rushing out into the street. I looked back over my shoulder, just in time to see Eileen turn around and disappear into the darkness of the woods. We looked around the street, trying to find the police car that was supposed to be guarding their house. When we finally found them, they didn't even realize we were missing. The morons smoking freaking Cubans instead of guarding our house from kidnappers. Unbelievable. I had never felt so neglected and unprotected in my life. My parents were gone, and now the police weren't even looking after me. The idiotic officers went and got Betty, driving the three of us down to the police station. Finally a place where I'd be safe, right? Trying to explain to the cops that my sister and I were placed under some kind of voodoo hypnotism spell that was like talking to a brick wall. Some cops were so ignorant, not open-minded at all. That's something I don't miss about Earth. People in authority were such dumbasses. At least Betty agreed to stay the night there with us. See what I'm talking about? Nicest lady you've ever met. At some point I fell asleep at the police station, and so did Betty and Nancy. What we woke up was not at all what anyone else ever wants to wake up to. Outside the station, a roar filled the air. The roar was like nothing I had never heard. That roar sounded like it came straight from the mouth of hell. The screams of policemen filled the air outside. We listened. It scared for our lives. It wasn't until the roaring died down and the screaming stopped and we dared look out the window. And let me say, it was not a pleasant sight. Dozens of bodies were scattered all over the parking lot. And here we were, tucked into a room back of the station, helpless. Nancy, Betty, and I crept down the halls of the station, trying to find an exit. We passed by an office just in time to get a look at one of the computer monitors, the one that had the CCTV footage of being fed to it. What we saw on the monitor was shocking. Eileen ripping the side door of the station off its hinges. What was even more shocking was her face. Her eyes were demonic. Her skin was rotten and scarred like a zombie. Her teeth looked grotesque. She looked as if she had meth mouth or something. Why the hell did she look at us like that? Now I know the answer. She was possessed and sick with that willingly conjured up spell to get herself possessed. It just got her hands on us. The witch ripped off the door off its hinges, rushing down the hallway towards us. She had us cornered in the office, and Betty, oh God, poor Betty. I couldn't believe my eyes. Eileen just picked Betty up by the throat, taunting her. It wasn't until Betty began to utter Lord's prayers that Eileen was sent into a fit of rage, pinning Betty to the wall, tearing her from limb to limb, right in front of Nancy and me too. Looking back, I can't even believe a 5-year-old girl was forced to watch something awful. Betty was slowly disemboweled. Eileen collected Nancy and me. Leo drove up to the police station and into that blue pickup we went to. No neighbor came to save us this time. Before I knew it, I always looked back at the awful place known as the Hofmeister home. No furniture this time, no creepy portraits, no lights on, just an empty shell of pure evil. Eileen and Leo took us into the living room, where they began to bicker with one another. Leo wanted to have his fun with Nancy, but Eileen told him to wait. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I wanted to get up there and rip his head off, if only I have to. To this day I wish I could have beat the living hell out of that sick bastard. During this, I started to wonder where David was, probably meeting the same fate my brothers and their friends did, and my parents. Oh God, please tell me they didn't too. Leo eventually got impatient with Eileen, telling her he was going to have what he wanted for a change. He turned to look at my little sister, precious little Nancy, grinning. "Come here, sunshine," he exclaimed. The rotten creep threw himself upon Nancy. I rushed at him, attempt to stop him. What I accomplished was getting a backhand to the face. When Eileen intervened, telling him he needed to wait, she received a punch to the jaw. That was a horrible idea on Leo's part. Did that moron forget that his wife was possessed? Eileen grabbed Leo, picking him up by the back of his neck. Nancy and I took our chance and ran away. Of course, the front door was right in the path of Eileen, so we had to run deeper into the house to find another way out. I looked back over my shoulder, just in time to see Eileen begin to bite down hard on her husband's face, chewing it like a dog on a bone. Leo's cries of pain were horrifying and reassuring to me. He got what he deserved. Nancy and I rushed through the house, desperately trying to find a way out. Why that house had to be so big? It was like a maze, and the fact that we could hear Eileen's demonic growling as she desperately tried to relocate us. Well, that didn't help either. Finally, we found a window that looked over the head of the hill. I quickly unlocked it, hearing Eileen's footsteps grow nearer and nearer. There was a screen on the window. I reared back and threw my hands onto it, tearing it, and it guided Nancy out all the way while listening to the haunted sounds of Eileen's feet hitting the ground wood floors. As Nancy jumped out, I yelled at her to run. I didn't have to tell her twice. As I began making out my window, I suddenly felt a hand or claw of Eileen grab on my shoulder. I screamed out, but no one was coming to help. Eileen then picked me up with the strength of an Olympic strongman, carrying me down to the hallway and into the basement. "No, please no," I fought. "Not the basement. Please not the basement." Well, the basement it was, as Eileen flung open the door and carried me down that musty cellar. As she got to the bottom of the stairs, clutching me in her arms, flicked on a light on, immediately a grisly figure was displayed by the dim light of the basement. It was a 7-foot-tall statue of the devil himself, complete with ram horns, ghoulish eyes, saber teeth, forked tail, hooved feet. That was when it was blowing that light. It must have been. But now it was in the basement. Eileen then plopped me down onto a wooden chair so that I was face to face with this horrible creature. She tied me down. This time it really was. I fought. Eileen then pulled out a black book with some kind of satanic symbol right in front of it. I tried begging and pleading with her, telling her I was sorry for the rumors I spread, even when I offered to tell the whole town that I was lying, and that the tales were made up. Why did I even bother? Eileen was having none of it. I then began to cry, asking her why she had to kill my brothers and my parents. Once I said this, Eileen developed a confused expression on her face. I did what to them?" she asked in her deep demonic voice. "Did you kill my parents?" I asked. "Patrick," Eileen said, "Lucifer does not want to just see people die. He wants to see them in hell with him." "What?" I asked in a sheepish tone. "Why, you could say your parent family is more alive than ever now," she exclaimed. That's when the awful truth was revealed. Out from the corner of the basement, behind the statue, came my parents, my brothers, their friends, and those kids I had seen walk into the house. David was also among them, but they walked into a zombie-like manner. When they all stepped into the light, I saw into their pitch-black, possessed eyes. Those horrible eyes were not the eyes of the people I knew. They all looked filth dirty and abused, and their skin almost looked like it had begun to decay. Eileen grinned with glee at this. You see, Patrick, she said, Mommy and Daddy are here. Say hi to Mommy and Daddy. I looked at my parents, desperately trying to get them out to respond to me, but they were gone. It was an awful feeling. Hail Lucifer! Shouted Eileen. Hail Lucifer! The hypnotized people said, in a monotone zombie fashion. Eileen then looked at me. And now you'll join them. Eileen opened the black book, began reciting the incantations. The zombies, the people I once knew, encircled me and began reciting with Eileen. I pleaded with my brothers, with David, with my parents, but it was no use. They were lost. Suddenly the statue's lifelike lips began to quiver intensively. I thought I was dreaming. It's funny when something like it happens. All you think to yourself is, holy crap, is this really happening? The statue's eyelids began to quiver as well, before opening to reveal pitch black eyes. The eyes began to glow a vibrant red, just as the statue's jaw began to unhinge, and then a loud roar erupted from the statue. This roar was even worse than Eileen's demonic roar, louder, much deeper. White mist in the shape of a human skull started to rise up from behind the statue, as Eileen shouted in English, Beastie's hungry! I screamed, blood-curdling scream as the mist made a beeline for me, shooting straight into my mouth, down my throat. I screamed as I felt my evil spirits make its way into my belly, wriggling around my insides. My high-pitched scream slowly began to grow deeper and deeper, turning me into a demonic roar. This is what I felt like becoming possessed. I was Eileen's now, but even worse, I was Lucifer's. The last months of my life were agonizing as I lost myself, lost who I was as a person. I became the evil zombie slave of Eileen Hofmeister, working to serve the devil himself. It was like a dream. I was in control of my actions, but I wasn't at the same time. My slave labor ended when my body began to slowly decay. That was when Eileen disposed of me, likely going to replace me with another poor child. That is why I am here now. It doesn't make sense at all. I don't deserve to be in this place. Sure, I lived out my last moments of my life serving God to advisory, but it wasn't my choice. Why then am I here? Some sort of mistake? Did heaven ran out of space? Or does everyone just go here? Are my parents here too? My brothers? Perhaps that is the worst part. I am not even granted those answers to these questions. I just live in total darkness and extreme heat. Regardless, I know it's Eileen's fault I'm here. It's all Eileen's fault. It was Eileen who stole me from the heavens of true life, and that is why from hell I write. Sorry, it's just I used to rhyme like that when I was young.